There are 44,000 jet engines flying commercially around the world right now. General Electric built most of them, and every single time one of those engines needs a part, they get paid. Despite this incredible competitive advantage, something strange happened recently. Up until last March, we saw investors enter a state of panic selling when it came to this company. Why? The market saw headlines about trade wars, Middle East wars, and manufacturing costs and thought, tariffs hit manufacturing, therefore we should sell GE. The stock lost as much as 20% of its market value in a short period. On April 2nd alone, their stock dropped nearly 14% in a single month. The market is pricing this company as if it were a traditional manufacturing company, a business whose primary exposure is building new things and getting crushed when import costs spike. But that is not General Electric Aerospace. In fact, it hasn't been that kind of company for a very long time. What GE Aerospace actually is, and this is the key to our analysis today, is an annuity business wearing a manufacturing costume. They build the engine once, that's the costume, but then they get paid every single time that engine flies for the next 25 to 30 years. Parts, shop visits, service agreements. It is a recurring revenue stream that is almost impossible to break. Welcome back to the Capital Navigator, the channel where we explore the strategies, business models, and financial realities of the world's most influential companies and what opportunities they offer to investors. Today, we're diving into GE Aerospace. Let's break it down. The origins. From conglomerate chaos to focused powerhouse. GE Aerospace's story doesn't start with the famous corporate split of 2024. It started over a century ago. To understand where they are going, we have to look at where it came from. The history of this company is the chronicle of one of the deepest transformations in corporate history. It is the story of a division that was once just a piece of a massive, sprawling conglomerate and eventually became a standalone global leader in aerial propulsion. In 1917, the US government asked General Electric to develop a turbo supercharger to improve aircraft performance at high altitude. Led by engineer Sanford Alexander Moss, this pioneering technology laid the foundation for GE's dominance in jet propulsion. For the next several decades, its history was a succession of technical innovations that marked the history of world aviation. A massive turning point occurred in 1974. GE entered into a strategic alliance that would change the industry forever. The creation of CFM International. This was a 50-50 joint venture with the French company Safran Aircraft Engines. This collaboration gave birth to the CFM 56 and later the LEAP engine families, engines that today dominate the market for single-aisle aircraft like the Boeing 737 and Airbus A320. Think about what this means. Airbus and Boeing are bitter rivals. They compete for every airline order, but both the Airbus A320neo and the Boeing 737 MAX fly on GE family engines through CFM. However, as the aerospace division was growing into a technical powerhouse, the parent company, General Electric, was changing under the leadership of Jack Welch. From 1981 to 2001, Welch transformed GE from a traditional industrial company into a machine for inorganic growth driven by aggressive acquisitions. His strategy was simple. They had to be number one or number two in every market it occupied. If it wasn't, it was sold. This satisfied Wall Street's demand for constant profit growth, but it began to hide the fact that the underlying industrial businesses were growing much more modestly. The most consequential move of the Welch era was the expansion of GE Capital. What started as a unit to help customers finance companies' products turned into a massive financial entity that dealt in insurance, credit cards, and real estate. GE Capital used the parent company's AAA credit rating to borrow money cheaply and invested in high-yield assets. At its peak, GE Capital represented more than 50% of the entire group's profits. But this created a dangerous dependency on financial engineering. It masked operational inefficiencies in the industrial segments and exposed the company to systemic risks. When Jeffrey Immelt took over in 2001, he inherited a model that was already exhausted. He continued the acquisition strategy, spending $175 billion on more than 300 companies. But the market had changed, and General Electric often paid high premiums for assets that didn't deliver. By 2018, the company was in an existential crisis. After a brief and troubled period under John Flannery, who had to reveal a massive $23 billion impairment charge, the board turned to H. Lawrence Culp, the first external CEO in GE's 126-year history. Larry Culp's mission was radical. He had to stabilize a company drowning in debt. Between 2018 and 2021, he reduced the company's gross debt by more than $87 billion. One of the most critical moves was the $30 billion merger of GE's aviation leasing business with AerCap, which allowed them to exit financial services and focus on its industrial core. In November 2021, Culp announced the final plan. General Electric would be split into 3 independent investment-grade companies focused on healthcare, energy, and aviation. The logic was clear. The conglomerate structure was no longer a benefit, it was a laster, an administrative and financial drag. Analysts had long pointed out a conglomerate discount of 10% to 12% on GE's stock because the complexity made it too hard to value. The result of this split was an explosion of value. In 2021, the market cap was around $118 billion. By 2025, the combined value of the 3 independent companies, GE Aerospace, GE Vernova, and GE Healthcare, hit $334 billion. That is nearly a 5-fold increase in value from the lows of 2022. On April 2, 2024, the process was completed, and GE Aerospace emerged as the sole legal successor to the original company, focused entirely on the aerospace sector. The business model, the razor and blades industrial masterpiece. Now that we know how GE Aerospace became an independent company, let's look at exactly how they make their money. Gillette sells you the razor handle at cost, sometimes below cost. Why? Because they're not selling you a razor, they're selling you a lifetime subscription to blades. GE Aerospace does the exact same thing, at $30 million per unit. When the company sells a jet engine to an airline, they price it aggressively, sometimes at near cost, sometimes at a loss on the hardware itself. Why? Because the moment that engine is bolted onto a wing, that airline becomes GE's customer for the next 25 to 30 years. Replacing a single engine mid-aircraft life costs $30 to $50 million. Airlines don't do that. Once the engine is installed, the airline is locked in. GE Aerospace operates through 2 primary segments: commercial engines and services, and defense and propulsion technologies. The commercial segment is the powerhouse, representing more than 75% of the business in 2025, with $33.3 billion in adjusted revenue. The strategy is built on capturing the aftermarket. While the sale of the original equipment might have low margins, the real profitability comes from decades of maintenance, repair, and overhaul, what the industry calls MRO. They don't make its money selling engines, it makes money servicing them. Every engine, by law, must go through scheduled maintenance visits, shop visits, overhauls, parts replacements, and the company controls the parts. They operate the overhaul facilities and sets the pricing. Here's the mechanism that turns the installed base into guaranteed revenue: the long-term service agreement. When an airline buys a GE engine, they almost always sign an LTSA at the same time. The agreement covers every scheduled shop visit, every major overhaul, spare parts at pre-negotiated pricing, often with cost escalation clauses, meaning if the input costs rise, they can pass them through contractually. This is contractually guaranteed revenue, written into a document before the engine even ships. In 2025, services represented approximately 75% of the commercial segment's revenue. This is why the business model is so resilient. Global commercial flight hours in 2025 are running above 2019 pre-pandemic levels. Every hour a plane is in the air, a GE engine is burning fuel, accumulating cycles, and getting closer to its next scheduled shop visit. More flights equals more engine hours. More engine hours equal more shop visits. More shop visits equals more services revenue. And here is where it gets genuinely interesting. You know the 2 best-selling commercial aircraft families in history? The Airbus A320neo and the Boeing 737 MAX. These 2 planes are bitter rivals. Airlines play them against each other in every negotiation. Boeing and Airbus essentially hate each other. But here's the secret. Both of them fly on a GE family engine. This is because of the CFM International joint venture we mentioned earlier. CFM makes the LEAP engine. This is the only engine option for the Boeing 737 MAX, and it is a leading option for the Airbus A320neo. Currently, CFM is ramping up LEAP production by 15% to 20% to meet the combined demand from Boeing's recovery and Airbus's accelerating A321 deliveries. This isn't just one market pulling GE higher, it's 2 competing markets pulling them up at the same time. And every LEAP engine delivered today is a 30-year service contract that begins the moment it leaves the factory. The installed base doesn't just generate revenue today, it programs future revenue for the next 3 decades. GE also supplies engines for half the global wide-body fleet. The Gen X engine for the Boeing 787 Dreamliner has been a massive success with over 3,000 units delivered with 99.98% dispatch reliability. The next big milestone? The GE9X engine for the Boeing 777X. It's the most powerful and efficient engine ever built. A marvel of engineering with a 134-inch fan making it the most powerful and efficient engine in its class. Despite Boeing's certification delays, first deliveries now expected early 2027, the GE9X has over 600 orders from Emirates, Qatar Airways, and Lufthansa. And let's not forget the defense segment. The stable revenue pillar GE's Defense and Propulsion Technologies segment generates stable, government-protected revenue. The company supplies engines for the F-15, F-16, and UH-60 Black Hawk. In 2025, this segment reported $13.4 billion in orders and $1.3 billion in operating profit. A $5 billion contract with the U.S. Air Force for F-110 engines underscores GE's global defense relevance. What we are looking at here is a moat, a competitive advantage that is incredibly difficult to cross. First, there is the massive installed base, 50,000 commercial engines and 30,000 military engines. Second, there are extreme barriers to entry. Developing a new jet engine requires an investment of $1 billion to $3 billion and development cycles that can last 15 years. You also have to deal with the most rigorous regulatory certifications from the Federal Aviation Administration and the European Aviation Agency. Finally, there is technological leadership. GE uses advanced materials like ceramic matrix composites and 3D printing to make engines that are lighter and more heat-resistant than anything else on the market. Again, it all comes back to the same point. The company wins the contract once, and then they collect a toll every time that engine flies for 30 years. There's another competitive dynamic we cannot forget: the Pratt and Whitney gift. Pratt and Whitney's geared turbofan engines, which compete with CFM's LEAP, have suffered a catastrophic durability crisis. Metal powder contamination has forced the grounding of hundreds of aircraft worldwide. Airlines now prioritize the reliability or time on wing over everything else. And CFM's engine dominates on this. This has handed CFM a structural advantage in new orders. The numbers, a profit machine hiding in plain sight. You understand the business model now, but seeing the numbers that prove it is another thing entirely. First, let's talk about that 70%. That is the share of GE Aerospace's commercial revenue that comes from aftermarket services. Not from building new engines or signing new contracts, but from maintaining the 50,000 commercial engines already in the sky. Second, let's look at the revenue growth. In 2023, total revenues were $35.3 billion. By 2025, they hit $45.8 billion. That is double-digit growth year over year, reinforcing the success of their commercial strategy. Even more impressive is the gross margin. GE has maintained gross margins above 25% for the last 3 years. Third, let's talk about profit. In 2025, the company reported an operating profit of $9.4 billion. That's up 25% year over year. Their operating margin is 20.6%, and their free cash flow was $7.7 billion. In 2025 alone, GE received $66.2 billion in new orders. Their backlog reached a total of $190 billion. This happened while the market was debating whether or not to sell the stock. Management isn't slowing down either. In its 2026 guidance calls, they expect operating profit between $9.8 billion and $10.2 billion. That is another year of double-digit profit growth, guided by the company itself during what the market is calling a crisis quarter. This is not a company in crisis. This is a company the market is temporarily mispricing because it's reading the tariff and wars headlines instead of reading the backlog. The risks: Boeing, supply chains, and geopolitics. Now we have to be cautious. As with any company, we must look at the risks. While GE Aerospace is in a very strong position, it does face certain headwinds. The first is the Boeing factor. Boeing delivered just 348 aircraft in 2024, a 34% drop from the prior year. There is a direct line from Boeing to GE. Every Boeing aircraft that isn't delivered on schedule is a LEAP engine that doesn't ship. That means original equipment revenue isn't recognized and the service contract doesn't start. Every year the 777X stays in certification limbo is a year the GE9X isn't generating the service revenue that the company has built into its model. While this mostly hits the 30% of the business that is original equipment manufacturer, Boeing is GE's largest customer, and their health matters. The second risk is the supply chain. They faces global fragility in its supply chain. While delays in new engines from Boeing and Airbus ironically benefit GE because airlines have to fly older planes longer, which means more maintenance, it also creates bottlenecks. There is a shortage of skilled labor and critical materials like helium and titanium superalloys. These are real limits on short-term growth. Then there is geopolitics. The conflict in the Middle East has created doubts about global economic growth. This has led to a re-rating of aerospace stocks driven by negative investor sentiment. Also, there is valuation. With a forward price-to-earning ratio between 36 and 52, the stock is trading at a high premium compared to its peers. Analysts are mostly bullish because the LEAP engine is just now entering its initial major maintenance cycles, which will skyrocket profitability in the coming years. But we must always watch the price we pay for even the best companies. And finally, the market perceived Q1 2026 guidance as disappointing, low double-digit growth versus higher rates in prior years. So where does this leave us? GE Aerospace beat its own internal targets for the first quarter of 2026 by $300 million. Revenue was up 29%, EPS was up 25%. Orders in a single quarter were up significantly. Management held their guidance out of macro caution, and the market sold the stock. If the supply chain recovers, if Boeing ramps back up, and if the LEAP aftermarket margins continue their upward track, the investment thesis for GE Aerospace remains completely intact. The market is looking at a manufacturing costume, but the reality is a services machine that controls the skies. What do you think? Are you bullish or bearish on GE Aerospace? Is this a buying opportunity? If you found this analysis helpful, please hit that like button and share this video. And for more deep dives into the companies that move the world, don't forget to subscribe to the Capital Navigator. I'm your host, and thank you for joining us. I'll see you in the next one.